There are moments in history when a single discovery doesn't just add to our understanding of the past, it shatters it. Imagine standing in a dusty excavation site, surrounded by fragments of a forgotten world, when suddenly, something appears that simply shouldn't exist. Not because it is broken, or ancient, or mysterious, but because it is too advanced, too precise, too impossible for its time. And yet, it's real. Over the past century, archaeologists have uncovered artifacts that challenge everything we think we know about human civilization. These objects don't just raise questions, they demand answers. And the deeper scientists look, the more unsettling the truth becomes. What if history, as we know it, is incomplete? What if entire chapters have been erased, misunderstood, or deliberately hidden? One of the most shocking discoveries ever made was found in the early 20th century, pulled from the depths of a Greek shipwreck that had lain untouched for over 2,000 years. At first glance, it looked like nothing more than a corroded lump of bronze. But as researchers began to clean and analyze it, something extraordinary emerged. Inside that encrusted mass were gears, dozens of them, perfectly aligned, intricately cut, and astonishingly precise. This object, now known as the Antikythera mechanism, has been described as the world's first analog computer. It could predict solar eclipses, track planetary movements, and map the cycles of the moon with a level of accuracy that rivals modern calculations. But here's the problem. According to mainstream history, technology like this wasn't supposed to exist until at least 1,000 years later. The Greeks were brilliant, yes, but machines of this complexity? With interlocking gears and mathematical ratios encoded into metal? It simply doesn't fit the timeline. For decades, scientists struggled to understand how such a device could have been created in an era we still associate with basic tools and primitive engineering. And the more advanced our imaging technology became, the more details were revealed. Hidden inscriptions, sophisticated calibration systems, even evidence that the mechanism had been part of a larger, more complex machine. This wasn't a fluke. It wasn't an isolated accident. It was the product of knowledge, deep mathematical, astronomical knowledge, that should not have existed at the time. Which leads to an uncomfortable question. If one such device existed, could there have been more? Could there have been an entire lost tradition of advanced engineering that vanished without a trace? Some researchers believe the Antikythera mechanism may be the last surviving fragment of a forgotten technological lineage, one that predates what we consider the birth of science itself. And this is where things begin to get even more intriguing. Because when we look beyond this single artifact, patterns start to emerge. Across different continents, in completely unrelated cultures, we find objects that carry the same signature: precision beyond expectation, knowledge beyond their era, and craftsmanship that seems almost out of place. It's as if history is leaving us clues, scattered across time, waiting to be pieced together. But every clue we uncover only deepens the mystery. What if the ancient world was not as primitive as we've been taught? What if civilizations rose, reached incredible heights of knowledge, and then disappeared, leaving behind only fragments of their achievements? The Antikythera mechanism forces us to confront that possibility. It suggests that our timeline of progress may not be a straight line at all, but something far more complex, filled with rises, collapses, and lost knowledge waiting to be rediscovered. And if that's true, then this artifact is not just a relic of the past. It is a warning that we may have forgotten more than we remember. The deeper we go into ancient history, the more we begin to encounter something deeply unsettling, not just advanced knowledge, but knowledge that feels eerily familiar. As if, somehow, ancient civilizations were tapping into principles we only recently rediscovered. And nowhere is this more controversial than in the shadowy corridors of ancient Egypt. Beneath the surface of its temples and tombs lies a mystery that refuses to go away. Not because it is easily proven, but because it is disturbingly difficult to dismiss. It begins with a series of carvings inside the Temple of Hathor at Dendera, images that, at first glance, appear symbolic. But look closer, and something strange emerges. Shapes resembling elongated glass bulbs. Inside them, serpentine forms stretching from one end to the other. connected to structures that look strikingly similar to electrical cables or power sources. For decades, Egyptologists have insisted these are purely symbolic depictions, representing the mythological creation story of the god Harsamtus emerging from a lotus flower. And that explanation, on the surface, seems reasonable. After all, ancient art is filled with metaphor. But here's where the doubt begins to creep in. The level of detail in these carvings is unusually precise. The proportions, the connections, the repeated patterns, they resemble not just any symbolic imagery, but a very specific kind of object. Something engineered. Something functional. And when modern researchers reconstructed these shapes into three-dimensional models, the resemblance became even more difficult to ignore. They looked like primitive vacuum tubes, or early forms of electric lamps. Now consider this. The interiors of many Egyptian tombs are decorated with intricate wall paintings and carvings, often located deep underground, far from any natural light. Yet, despite extensive exploration, there is a striking absence of soot or smoke residue on the ceilings, something you would expect if torches or oil lamps had been used consistently in these enclosed spaces. This anomaly has puzzled historians for years. How were these areas illuminated with such clarity, without leaving behind evidence of traditional fire-based lighting? Some fringe researchers have proposed a radical idea that the ancient Egyptians may have developed a form of electrical lighting, possibly using devices similar to what we now call the Baghdad battery. These ancient clay jars, discovered in modern-day Iraq, contain a copper cylinder and an iron rod, components that could theoretically generate a small electric current when filled with an acidic solution. While the mainstream scientific community remains skeptical about their intended use, experimental recreations have shown that they can indeed produce electricity. So the question becomes unavoidable. If ancient cultures possessed even a basic understanding of electrical principles, could they have applied it in ways we have yet to fully comprehend? Could the carvings at Dendera be more than symbolic art? Could they be a visual record of a technology that has been lost to time? Of course, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And as of now, there is no definitive proof that the Egyptians had electric lighting in the way we understand it today. But the absence of proof is not proof of absence. Especially when the clues, however controversial, continue to surface. What makes this mystery so compelling is not just the possibility that ancient people were more advanced than we think, but that their knowledge may have been systematically misunderstood, simplified, or even dismissed because it doesn't fit our established narrative. Because if even a fraction of this is true, it changes everything. It suggests that human innovation did not begin where we thought it did. That the roots of science and technology may stretch far deeper into the past than our current models allow. And perhaps most unsettling of all, it raises the possibility that entire systems of knowledge, complex, functional, and powerful, once existed, and then vanished without a trace. And just when you think the mystery couldn't get more disturbing, another artifact emerges, this time from the heart of South America. A collection of ancient stones, engraved with images so bizarre, so anachronistic, that they seem to defy logic itself. Images of humans, performing surgery, using tools that resemble modern instruments, and even interacting with creatures that should have gone extinct millions of years before humans ever appeared. There are discoveries that challenge timelines, and then there are those that completely obliterate them. Deep in the arid landscape of Peru, a collection of artifacts emerged that, if authentic, could force us to reconsider not just history, but the very origin of human knowledge. These are known as the Ica stones. Thousands of them. Smooth, dark andesite rocks, each engraved with scenes that feel disturbingly out of place in the ancient world. At first, they seem almost artistic, even primitive. But the longer you look, the more the unease sets in. Because these carvings are not random. They are deliberate, detailed, and shockingly specific. Some stones depict humans performing complex surgical procedures. Not basic operations, but what appear to be organ transplants, brain surgery, even heart replacement. Figures are shown holding tools that resemble scalpels, with assistants present, and patients connected to something that looks eerily like a system for circulation or life support. The anatomical accuracy is striking. Veins, organs, structural detail, it's all there, etched into stone by hands that should not have possessed such knowledge. And yet the scenes are consistent across multiple stones, suggesting a shared understanding rather than isolated imagination. But the mystery doesn't stop there. Other stones portray something even more controversial. Humans interacting with dinosaurs. Not as mythical beasts, not as abstract symbols, but as real, physical creatures. Riding them. Observing them. Coexisting with them. According to everything we know from modern science, this is impossible. Dinosaurs went extinct around 65 million years ago. Humans, in their current form, have existed for only a fraction of that time. The gap is enormous. Unbridgeable. And yet these stones seem to ignore that gap entirely. Naturally, skepticism followed. Many researchers have labeled the Ica stones as elaborate hoaxes, pointing to local farmers who claim to have carved some of them for profit. And it's true, there is evidence that at least a portion of these artifacts were fabricated in modern times. But here's where the situation becomes complicated. Not all the stones can be so easily dismissed. Some were reportedly discovered in sealed tombs, alongside artifacts that have been independently verified as ancient. Others show signs of aging and weathering that are difficult to replicate artificially. The sheer number of stones, over 10,000, also raises questions. If this is a hoax, it is one of the most extensive and coordinated in history. What makes the Ica stones so unsettling is not just their content, but the possibility they represent. Because if even a small fraction of them are genuine, then we are faced with a scenario that defies conventional understanding. It would imply that either humans existed alongside dinosaurs, or that ancient civilizations had access to knowledge far beyond what we currently believe possible. Knowledge of anatomy, of medicine, of prehistoric life, preserved and passed down through means we have yet to uncover. Some researchers have proposed that the stones are not literal records, but symbolic representations of lost knowledge, perhaps inherited from an earlier civilization, one that observed or understood the natural world in ways we can barely imagine. Others suggest something even more radical. That human history is not linear, but cyclical. That advanced civilizations may have risen and fallen long before our recorded history begins, leaving behind fragments of their understanding encoded in artifacts like these. And this is where the line between science and mystery begins to blur. Because the more we try to explain these objects within our current framework, the more contradictions we encounter. It's as if the stones are speaking a language we don't fully understand, offering glimpses of a past that refuses to fit into our neatly constructed timeline. A past where the boundaries between eras, species, and knowledge are not as clear as we once believed. If the Antikythera mechanism hinted at lost technology, and the Dendera carvings suggested forgotten science, then the Ica stones push the question even further. They force us to ask not just how advanced ancient people were, but how much of our understanding of human existence might be fundamentally incomplete. And just when it seems like we've reached the edge of possibility, another discovery pulls us even deeper into the unknown. This time, not carved in stone, but shaped with such impossible precision that even modern engineers struggle to explain it. A crystal skull, perfectly formed, optically aligned, and crafted in a way that defies the tools of its time. There are objects that are mysterious, and then there are objects that feel almost unnatural. Not because they are broken or incomplete, but because they are too perfect. Too precise. Too far beyond what should have been possible at the time they were created. Among all the controversial artifacts ever discovered, few have captured the imagination, and the unease, of researchers quite like the crystal skulls. At first glance, they appear almost decorative. Beautiful, translucent sculptures carved from solid quartz. But the more closely they are examined, the more they begin to defy explanation. The most famous of these is often referred to as the Mitchell Hedges skull, reportedly discovered in the early 20th century in the ruins of an ancient city in Central America. Unlike ordinary carvings, this skull is not made from soft stone or easily shaped material. It is carved from a single block of quartz crystal, one of the hardest natural substances on Earth. Even today, Shaping quartz with precision requires advanced tools, diamond-tipped instruments, and controlled techniques to prevent cracking. And yet this skull was formed with an astonishing level of detail. The jaw is detachable, perfectly aligned with the rest of the structure. The eye sockets are polished to such optical clarity that they can channel and refract light in complex ways. When light enters the skull, it behaves almost as if the object was engineered to manipulate it. Here's where the mystery deepens. According to modern analysis, the skull shows no clear marks of tool usage. No microscopic scratches that would indicate carving with traditional instruments. No signs of gradual shaping or abrasion that would normally be expected when working with quartz. Instead, the surface appears uniformly polished, as if it had been formed through a process we don't fully understand. Some experts have estimated that using conventional methods available in ancient times, it would have taken hundreds of years of continuous work to achieve such a result, if it were even possible at all. Naturally, this has led to intense debate. Many scientists argue that at least some of the crystal skulls are modern creations, produced in the 19th or early 20th century using advanced lapidary techniques. And in some cases, there is evidence to support this claim. But not all skulls are identical. Differences in style, composition, and internal structure suggest that they may not all originate from the same source or period. And this is where things become less clear, less comfortable. Because even if we accept that some of these skulls are modern, it doesn't automatically explain all of them. There are still examples that resist easy classification. Objects that exhibit characteristics difficult to replicate, even with today's technology. And beyond their physical properties, there is something else that continues to draw attention. The legends surrounding them. Stories passed down through generations, claiming that these skulls were not merely decorative, but functional. That they were used as tools, devices capable of storing information, amplifying consciousness, or even communicating with something beyond our current understanding. Of course, such claims move us into the realm of speculation. There is no scientific evidence to confirm that the skulls possess any kind of mystical or technological function. But the persistence of these stories is difficult to ignore. Across different cultures, separated by distance and time, we find similar motifs, crystal objects associated with knowledge, memory, and power. It raises an interesting possibility. That even if the legends are exaggerated, they may be rooted in something real. A fragment of truth that has been distorted, mythologized, and carried through centuries. What makes the crystal skulls so compelling is not just the question of how they were made, but why. Why invest such extraordinary effort into creating an object of this complexity? Why design it with such optical precision? Was it purely symbolic, or did it serve a purpose we have yet to recognize? And if it did serve a purpose, what was it? By now, a pattern should be forming. Each artifact we've explored doesn't just challenge a single aspect of history, it destabilizes entire assumptions. Technology appearing too early. Knowledge emerging without clear origin. Craftsmanship exceeding the limits of its time. It's as if we are looking at the remnants of something larger, something more advanced, hidden just beyond the edge of our understanding. And yet, the final artifact may be the most unsettling of all. Because it doesn't just suggest lost knowledge or advanced craftsmanship, it hints at something even more disturbing. A device that appears to represent the entire solar system, created thousands of years before we had the means to observe it. There is a moment, when studying the past, where curiosity turns into something else entirely. Not wonder, but discomfort. Because sometimes, what we find doesn't just expand our understanding, it exposes the limits of it. And among all the artifacts that challenge our perception of ancient knowledge, few are as quietly disturbing as those that seem to map the cosmos itself. Long before telescopes, long before modern astronomy, ancient civilizations were already looking at the sky. That much is undeniable. But what if they weren't just observing it? What if they were understanding it at a level we assumed was impossible? In a small museum collection in Germany, a bronze disc was revealed to the world in the early 2000s after being recovered from looters. Known today as the Nebra Sky Disc, it dates back over 3,000 years. At first glance, it appears simple, a circular plate with golden inlays. But those inlays are not random decorations. They form patterns. A crescent shape, a round disk, clusters of points that align with known star formations, including what many believe to be the Pleiades. Along the edges, arcs that seem to correspond to the horizon points of the sun's rising and setting during solstices. This is not art for the sake of beauty. It is information. Encoded. Structured. Intentional. What makes the Nebra disk so extraordinary is not just its age, but its accuracy. The alignment of its elements suggests a level of astronomical observation that would require long-term tracking of celestial movements. Not over days or months, but over years, even generations. It implies a systematic approach to understanding the sky. A kind of proto-science that blends observation with abstraction. And yet, according to conventional timelines, the people of that era were not expected to possess such detailed knowledge of celestial mechanics. They had no telescopes, no advanced instruments. And still, they managed to create what may be the oldest known representation of the cosmos. But the deeper you look, the more questions emerge. How did they achieve such precision without optical tools? How did they track the movement of stars with enough consistency to encode it into a durable object? And perhaps most importantly, why? What drove them to invest so much effort into mapping the heavens? Was it purely for agricultural purposes, tracking seasons and cycles? Or was there something more? Something philosophical? Or even technological? Because the Nebra disk is not an isolated case. Across the world, we find structures aligned with celestial events. Temples that frame the sunrise on specific days. Stone circles that track lunar cycles. Entire cities designed with astronomical precision. It's as if ancient civilizations were not just aware of the sky, they were deeply connected to it. As if their understanding of existence was inseparable from the movements above them. And in some cases, their knowledge seems to go beyond what direct observation alone could provide. This leads to a possibility that is difficult to ignore. That ancient people may have had access to systems of knowledge that have since been lost. Not magic. Not myth. But structured, accumulated understanding passed down through generations, refined, and then, somehow erased. Whether through collapse, catastrophe, or simple forgetting, we may be left with only fragments, artifacts like the Nebra disk, offering glimpses into a worldview far more sophisticated than we've been taught. And when we step back and look at all the pieces together, a pattern begins to take shape. A mechanism that calculates the movements of the heavens with mechanical precision. Carvings that hint at forgotten technologies. Stones that depict knowledge out of time. Objects crafted with impossible accuracy. And now, a map of the sky created in an age before we believed such mapping was possible. Each artifact on its own is puzzling. But together, they form something else entirely. A narrative. One that suggests our history is not a simple progression from ignorance to knowledge, but a far more complex story of discovery, loss, and rediscovery. Maybe the most unsettling truth is not that ancient civilizations were more advanced than we thought. It's that they may have known things we have yet to fully understand. That progress is not guaranteed. That knowledge can be lost. And that somewhere in the ruins of the past, there may still be answers waiting, answers that could change not just how we see history, but how we see ourselves.